You might not know this, but how you are sending your leads to book a sales call might be costing you fistfuls of money and reducing down the amount of people that are actually booking calls. Now, in this video, I'm going to go through some of the basics that we have set up for ourselves and for our clients in their calendar schedulers. So this is Calendly, or any scheduling tool that you might use to get people booked in. And just making these simple changes can not only open up your availability and get more people booking, but typically this will drastically increase the amount of throughput and the volume of sales calls that you book, ultimately leading to more sales. So let's go and get into it. Now, in the video, I'm going to cover some of the fundamentals about how we're able to maximize booked calls, but we're really just going to focus on the scheduler itself. So Calendly, this is what our scheduler looks like if you're not familiar. It's a link you send people to book them in on the calendar. And there's 4 things that I'm going to cover inside of this video. The first is the fundamentals of booking sales calls. Just really understanding what's going on to make sure that you're not making any simple mistakes. And this is also going to help you avoid just copying somebody else that might be slightly more successful for you and making mistakes that you might not be aware are actually existing. For example, we have a lot of people that copy our calendar, but our calendar is drastically different with what we do compared to brand new people who don't have enough sales call volume. So I'm going to explain the difference between those two. The second thing we're going to cover is just some of the scheduler basics, helping you to understand how you can maximize booked calls just by tweaking your calendar. The third thing we're going to cover is, well, what questions should you put inside of your calendar? We're going to go through BANT as well as just what qualifier questions you want to put in. And at the end of the video, I'm going to give you 2 very simple hacks to increase the volume of your sales calls through maximizing your availability and sending people direct to your calendar. So first up, the fundamentals of book sales calls. When it comes to booking more calls into your calendar, one of the biggest mistakes that I see people doing is thinking that you need to have a fancy website, a fancy funnel, or something that's designed to, qualify people. The simple fact of the matter is, the more friction that you create for people coming in from your link, the less people will book a call. So on one hand, you can send someone straight to a calendar page. They can put in a date and time, and they can book in without filling in any questions. And on the other hand, you might have a dedicated website with a video and headlines and information, and it actually takes a really long time for people to scroll down and fill in the calendar. Now, both of those options are very different. One has very little friction, and the other one has a lot of friction. So where should you be adding friction in your business, in your calendar and your book sales calls, and why? So typically, you'll want to add friction into your sales process if you have a lot of calls that are coming in and you're noticing that the quality of those calls isn't as good as you want it to be. So to give you a really practical example, my sales team right now is made up of 2 sales reps, and they typically are taking about 6 sales calls per day. And what we've noticed recently is that we actually have more booked sales calls coming in than the sales reps are actually able to handle. And some of those calls that are getting booked into the calendar, are people who aren't super qualified. They're coming in, maybe they haven't heard of us before, they really don't understand what it is that we do. And a lot of time on that sales call is spent just explaining some of the basics and the fundamentals. In this example, it makes a lot of sense for us to add some friction. Rather than sending somebody directly to our calendar, if we send them to a landing page with a 2-minute video, a couple of bullet points, maybe disqualifying people who aren't the right fit, and then putting the calendar option in, what this will do is basically create a bit of friction. It's going to mean that some people are going to be turned off and aren't going to click through, but the right people are. And that way we get slightly less booked calls, but the calls are higher quality. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we have some clients who come and enroll in our Media Firestorm program who maybe have 5,000 people on their email list, and they're only booking 1 or 2 sales calls a week. And when we go and we look at what they're doing, fundamentally there's usually 2 problems. One, they're just not offering sales calls enough. Ideally, you want to offer them every day in your emails. But secondly, when they do write an email and they say, hey, click here to book a call, a lot of the time they're sending them to a website. People are going to land on that website. They're going to get confused by all the options and they're going to bounce right off it. So if you don't have a high volume of sales calls getting booked every week, one of the first things that you can do is just reduce down the friction. Send people direct to your calendar so that they're going to get booked in much, much quicker. And so this is some of the fundamentals that you need to understand. First of all, if you don't have a high volume of calls, sending direct to a calendar is going to work better than sending to a funnel. You need to understand the reason that people have low friction versus high friction and when to use it. And finally, you want to have qualifiers inside of your sales calendar to really just make sure that the people who are booking in for calls are actually your dream customer. So are they the right size business? Do they have the budget? Are they able to afford to invest with you? Are they actually the decision maker? Do they need what it is that you sell in your service? And are there any qualifiers that are really important to make sure that they can actually use and benefit from your service? So all of this stuff is stuff that you want to be understanding when it comes to the sales calls themselves. All right, now let's go through some of the calendar basics. These are little things that you might not think about when setting up your calendar, but actually make a huge difference. Things like time increments, things like how far out you're letting people book sales calls. Some of this stuff is game changing for helping you book a lot more calls. So let's go through each of these individually. So the first thing you want to have when it comes to your calendar scheduler is just having a very clear outcome in both the description and the headline. So I'm going to give you a couple examples here. So for ours, this is one of our booking calendars. The first thing for our headline is that we have a very clear outcome. Get booked on 50 of the best podcasts in our network. So first thing is just very clear what they're going to get when they book a call. Similarly, you can look at the scaling workshop by the Hormozis, scale your business in person with Alex Layla and the acquisition.com team. So very, very clear in terms of here's what you're going to get. And when you actually get to their scheduler, it's saying, congrats, you qualified for a workshop, book a call to secure your ticket for our next in-person event. So this one talks very much about the outcome. Now, this is an example of more friction, right? You probably don't want as much friction as this inside of the process. You probably just want to take this headline and bang it directly into your calendar itself. So that's the first thing, and making sure that you have a nice, clear outcome that's not too long as your description. So here we say you're going to book your Zoom meeting with us and the team to get our help featuring you on 50 of the best podcasts in the needaguest.com network over the next 6 months. And then we even go and say what we will do. We'll help you get booked on 2 podcasts every week, help you send a simple email each day, and work with you for 6 months. And this is also a note here based on the calendar availability, which is another one of these key things in the calendar. So we'll come back to that in a second. So that's the first step. The second thing, and this is very easily overlooked, but 15-minute availability and book within the hour. So when you're inside of your calendar screens here, you actually have some options for your schedule settings. So the first thing is, how long are people booking over? So for here, you can see we're booking out currently 3 work days into the future. Now you can either pick calendar days. I like weekdays because on a Friday, it will show Friday, Monday, and Tuesday in terms of the availability. So this is a great setting to have. But what you want to look at down here in your event times is what's the minimum notice someone can book in, and you want to have your start time increments in 15 minutes. So there was a study done by some really big companies which shows that the more available start time increments that you have and the more available times people can book in, the more sales calls and the more sales deals actually got closed. And so an ideal sort of time frame that you want to go for here is you want to make sure that you're booking only 2 to 3 days out in your schedule. And this is to reduce down no-show rates. No-show rates typically go significantly higher the further out that you book. About the best is a 2-day out schedule, but you can stretch to 3 days depending on availability. And again, this is in terms of ideal ratios, but having 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. available Monday through Sunday is actually one of the best ways that you can increase sales. Now, you don't want to be working 9 to 9 p.m. Like, this is actually going to be more achievable with a full sales team. If you have 2, 3, 4 people on your sales team, you'll want to have that full 7-day coverage from 9 to 9 p.m. But here's some of the things that I would do in the beginning. If it's just you that's currently doing sales calls, or maybe one rep that's doing it, what I would begin with is making your time available from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, with blocking out 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. as your CEO time. So in that CEO time, that's where you want to be doing things like, getting booked on podcasts, getting traffic, doing lead generation, and also like writing a daily email to book more sales calls, or whatever activity you do to book more calls. That way, 9 to 12 every day is blocked off on working on the business. 12 till 5 every day is going to be blocked for doing sales calls. And then if you have any client delivery or anything like that, blocking that off to be from 4 till 6 or from 5 till 6, Monday through Friday, should give you enough time, either 5 or 10 hours a week, that you can dedicate to delivery. So doing it this way is going to give you 25 available sales call slots in a typical week. And if you've got 15-minute time increments, it's actually 100 available time slots for people to choose from. So those are some basic calendar things which actually just make a huge difference in getting a lot more throughput. So have a very clear outcome, make sure that there are 15-minute availabilities, make sure they can book within the hour, only have 2 to 3 days out in your schedule to make sure that we're reducing down any of those no-show rates. And then you want to also make sure you've got as much availability as possible within that time frame. So this is super key. You can even see on acquisition.com, they're only booking 3 days out in the schedule. But if you look at all of their time slots, there's a lot of these 15-minute time slots that are available, which just means you're way more likely to book a call based on what they've got going on here. Now, the third thing I want to talk about here is your calendar questions. Now, we talked earlier about less friction and more friction. So surely adding in qualifying questions is going to add a little bit more friction. Well, sure. But what you'll often find is if someone's going to book in on the calendar, even if you have 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 questions in your calendar, most of the time it isn't going to drastically reduce down the volume of booked calls. But as always, this is something that you probably want to split test. So for a couple of weeks, have, one calendar that has 1 or 2 questions, and then for a couple of weeks, have a calendar that has, more questions, and see what happens in terms of the overall distance. In terms of, are there more booked calls? Is there a higher conversion rate, or do you close more deals? And typically, you always want to be looking at, okay, what's going to get me the most closed deals at the end of the day? Now, and when you're adding in your calendar questions, it is a really good idea to have some qualification questions. So a really, really popular framework that's brilliant to use is BANT. This was originally created by IBM years and years and years ago. It's pretty much used exclusively now in the SaaS industry. Everybody uses BANT. And what BANT stands for is budget, authority, need, and timing. And so if you type in BANT, you'll find lots of these little articles like this one from HubSpot on what it stands for, how to best use it. And essentially what BANT is there to do is help you really figure out, one, before somebody gets on a sales call, do they have the budget they need to be able to invest? You can determine this by revenue numbers, employee count, or actually just asking them, hey, do you have the budget to spend on this? Authority means, are they the person that can be making the decision? Is this the business owner that's booking a call, or is this a VA for the business owner who can't really make a decision? Do they have the need? This is actually super important, because if you just book a sales call with somebody and you say, hey, here's a 30-minute discovery call to see if we can help you, and there are no other qualifications, how do you even know that they need or qualify for the service that you provide? So a lot of the time you want to have a question related to the product and service that you're delivering. And then timing, how quickly do they want to get help? There was a study done by Gym Launch, which was really interesting, and it showed that in their calendar questions, they had, how quickly do you want help? And the questions were yesterday, today, tomorrow, or a week later or a month later. And anybody that didn't put one of the first 3 options, 80% of those deals didn't close. And so what they started doing in the long span was they actually just got rid of all of the applications where somebody said, okay, I'm ready to start next week or a month later, because most of the time those deals weren't turning into customers. And I think it was near like 90 or 95%. So you want to have BANT inside of your questions, and then you also would potentially have some unique customer qualifiers. So in our business, we typically are working with business owners who sell a high ticket offer over the phone, and typically they have an email list of 1,500 to 10,000 people plus, and lots of our clients have 20, 30, 40,000 people on their email list. So that's something we would put into our questions. So to give you an idea here, if you are booking in on our calendar, the next thing that we would do is go and then ask you some key questions. So if you want to have an example of what this looks like, you can see inside of here, we'll click a time, and then on the next page, we have the questions. Where did you first hear about us? What's your website? What's your current monthly revenue? This is budget in BANT. How big is your email list? Is a customer qualification for us. Describe your product and price point you sell at is another customer qualification. You know, who is your avatar is, again, this is need. We're making sure that they're the right fit. And assuming we're a perfect fit together, how soon would you need help from us? Going back to BANT, this is timing. You know, how quickly are they ready to get help? Right away, few days, couple of weeks, other priorities. And then if you feel like the strategy you map is a good fit, are you willing and able to invest? And so this is, again, budget-based questioning. So adding some of these questions can be really helpful so that when you're taking these sales calls, you have a good foundation and understanding of who these leads are and where they're at. So far we've covered the fundamentals, understanding about friction versus low friction. We've talked about the calendar scheduler basics. We've also talked about your calendar questions. Now, two very, very simple hacks that you can do that's going to help increase your sales call volume almost immediately is doing two things. One, maximize availability like we talked about, and two, start sending people directly to your calendar link. So however you book sales calls, our favorite way to book sales calls is with emails. We send a written daily email to all of our entire list every single day with a short, simple, funny story about something that's going on in our life, and then a call to action that says, hey, if you need help, here's how we can help you. And essentially, the whole goal of our daily emails is to entertain our leads so that they want to read our advertisement about our business. That's it. And so when you are marketing, whatever way you are telling your leads to book a sales call, one of the first things that you can do is just send them directly to your sales calendar, not to a website or funnel. Now remember, you want to do this if you have not enough booked calls on the calendar. If you have a high volume of calls, but the quality is low, you may instead want to add friction, like we talked about earlier. So what this is going to do is it's going to increase throughput. More people are going to book calls because they're not going to get distracted by a website or a landing page. Because of that, you're going to get more calls. And generally, when there's less friction, you're going to find that your sales calendar fills up much quicker. So step one, send them direct to the calendar. And then step number two is to make sure you're maximizing your calendar's availability. Open up your schedule from 12 to 5 every day, block off 9 till 12 so nobody can disturb you in that time. That way you get 15 hours a week of pure time working on the business, 25 hours a week of sales-based time, and then you can play around with that last hour of the day or from 5 till 6 if you need some extra time for delivering your product. That's going to give you 25 potential call slots, 100 unique time slots with 15-minute options. And then if you open up your calendar 2 to 3 working days ahead and try and make sure that you're moving all non-sales based activities to 9 to 12 or at a different time, that's going to help you a lot in making sure that you get more throughput on these book sales calls. So that's everything that I wanted to cover to help you understand how you can get more out of your current marketing efforts just by adjusting what you do inside of your scheduler. And so hopefully this was helpful. If you'd like more help and more support with something like this, please feel free to join our Facebook group. We're really great at helping people get booked on more podcasts and getting more exposure inside of our network. Feel free to go to needagaguest.com and join our Facebook group, which is called Need a Guest, if you want to go and join it inside of Facebook. And if you're actually interested in getting help with booking more sales calls, getting more exposure, and generally fixing lead generation in your company, just go down to the description down below, and we're happy to help and maybe book a call with our team to see if we can help you.